It is up to the Catholic culture to have a positive influence on politics so that you can actually be a good public servant. And a good public servant is not going to be an oligarch. They're not going to be elitists. They're not going to tamper down the drive of people. And they're not going to try to make everyone exactly the same. A good Catholic leader will always rise to the occasion and learn how to fight against these evils without violence, but with virtue. Welcome to the Father Leo Show, where I'm dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. And in this episode, we're going to talk about how the Catholic Church is the greatest weapon against fascism, against communism, against socialism, against any type of leading governmental force that wants to take away freedom and dignity of the human person. So we're going to jump right into it, but before we do, I want to encourage you to please like, subscribe, share, and comment on these videos. By doing so, it's a simple act. All you got to do is click subscribe, like, and add a comment. It'll certainly help us in the algorithms of YouTube. And also, please consider supporting us with a $5 gift each month so that we can continue to provide for you commentary on the things that matter most, but in a way that actually brings people together, that informs you and doesn't divide us, even more than the world already is divided. And besides, whenever you do subscribe to our Patreon community, you can get access to some great formative content as well as some special perks. But let's just jump right into it right now with John Paul II's role in how the Catholic Church, especially in Poland, helped to defeat communism, at least for now. One of the things about the Catholic Church is that we are the enemies to all things that cause injustice, whether it be through the spiritual injustices of sin, whether it be the injustices caused by a lack of human formation. We see that a lot in the wokeness of the world. But we're also the greatest enemy to totalitarianisms that come in the form of fascism, that come in the form of communism, and that come in the form of socialism. I am shocked that many Catholics have confused the Catholic teaching of social justice for socialism. And I'm equally shocked that many Catholics actually think that communism is a good thing. It is shocking to me how ignorant our world has become. And so I just thank God for people like St. John Paul II, who knew what it was like to grow up in communism. Now, I'm getting all excited about this simply because I just got back from Poland. And I want to, in my comments regarding faith, talk about the faith of the Polish people. And why? Because they truly are, in a sense, the center of Europe. They're considered Central Europe. But at the same time, they are keeping Europe Catholic in many ways because of people like St. John Paul II. You can do a lot of your own research about St. John Paul II, but he did not grow up in a privileged lifestyle. His mother died when he was very young. His father died when he was a young man, and he recalls how when he met his father, who was dead on the kitchen table with a cup of tea that he was drinking, he talked about how he never felt more lonely in his life at that moment. He grew up under the destructive forces of communism, and he really had to work very hard, even working in a quarry mine, basically digging out rocks. So he's not in any way a lightweight by any imagination, but he was also an intellectual person, very intelligent, master of many languages, but also the language of just communication. His ability as a rhetorician has been incredibly notable from all world figures of the modern era. But I got to tell you, it was his fight against communism that I'm most impressed about. And the reason is because if we were to take an actual look at what fascism and communism is, and you can see why the church is completely against it, fascism is basically a governmental system led by one person, a dictator who has complete power over an entire country. You can see why the Catholic Church is completely against that, because there is only one true ruler, and that is Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ gives every person autonomy, the ability to make decisions for themselves, as long as their consciences are informed. Now, what is communism? Well, unlike fascism, a communist government focuses on equal treatment and opportunities for all citizens, but it's not like good. This is not a terrible way, because they think that everyone is equal. So they're completely against capitalism and completely against anything entrepreneurial. In other words, they're against the freedom of people to make their own decisions and to kind of grow. So communism, coming from the understanding of communis, which is basically common and universal, they want everyone to be exactly the same. And that is a problem. Again, they are not only anti-capitalist and anti-entrepreneurial, they're definitely anti-religion. In fact, the father of communism, Marx, talks about how religion is the opium of the masses, opium of the people, because it prompts workers to accept capitalist oppression as part of their plan from God. They are not only authoritarian, but they are also a classlessness. So fascists are very class-oriented. Communists, they don't want any type of class whatsoever. They believe in a collectivism, but they also, like fascists, believe in government control. So even though they talk about being classless, there are two classes. It's the elected, not elected, because they're not elected. They're somehow the elite people in government, and then the masses, the dumb people like us. And so when we look at communism, you can see why Catholicism is truly, truly an enemy of it. Socialism and communism are very similar. I mean, if you take a look at Nazis, it's the National Socialist Party. They had a very similar understanding of how government is in charge. And while socialism can exist to some degree with capitalist people, it's not really that way at all. Socialists think that you should be able to take from the rich and give it to the poor. It's trying to be social, but basically means to be sharing with others. But that's not how it works at all, simply because when you look at this, socialism includes a planner, someone who is in charge of what collective ownership would be. And so you can see how the Catholic Church has always been the greatest enemy against these communist, fascist, and socialist approaches. And it is shocking to me that America is becoming socialist, it is truly becoming fascist, and it is truly becoming communist. And you can tell that because the communists, the fascists, and the socialists are always calling people who just want to live a free life those very things. That's kind of like a playbook for communist, fascist, and socialist. And St. John Paul II wanted to have nothing to do with it. I kind of want to just share with you a little bit of what happened when St. John Paul visited Yasna Gora, which is known as the Black Madonna, and how he used his visit to Poland to basically stick it to the communists and let them know that Poland, even though Polish people were basically under communist rule forever, they wanted to get rid of religion completely. They weren't having any of it because the Queen of Poland, namely Yasna Gora, also known as Our Lady of Częstochowa, i.e. the Black Madonna, is a protectress with her prayers over the Polish people and always pointing to Jesus Christ. Check this out from ABC News back in the day.
Trouble with the government, it is still important your listener hears what you have to say. It is nuance and interpretation which gets the message through. As the Pope came here to Yasna Gora today, his congregation waited to discover whether he would continue his excursion into the politics of Eastern Europe. John Paul has emphasized the reality. In Poland, at least, politics and religion are inseparable. He reminded the faithful Pope Paul VI had wanted to come here. The Polish government had said no. There is little doubt in any of these vast crowds that were this Pope not Polish, he wouldn't be here either. How potent is his message? Polish television has broadcast his visit, but is under instructions not to show how large the crowds are. This was largely a day devoted to the Virgin Mary, to whom this shrine is dedicated. But once again, he departed from his text, entrusting, he said, nations he could not name to her care. There is little doubt among the faithful he carries the banner for all Christians behind the Iron Curtain. Here in Yasna Gora today, church officials charge government authorities with preventing the faithful from coming. The hunger to see the Pope is everywhere. Many Poles believe this will be the last time his homeland sees him in person. The extent of his visit, this tireless man, might lead one to think he agrees. Bill Blakemore travels with him.
"What else do you want to sing?" he asked. And another old Polish song welled up from the crowd, and they sang together, his deep baritone amplified, booming out above them, a long duet between the crowd, mostly young people, and their Pope. His speech had finished an hour before in this town square, but they wouldn't let him go, nor did he want to. In earlier days, as priest and bishop, he'd often hiked in his native mountains here with youth groups, sung around the campfire. The words of one song they sang now together: "Mountaineer, aren't you sad to leave? Aren't you sad? Come back to your mountain home." And another sung frequently in Poland with political overtones about the Black Madonna, at whose shrine the Pope prayed today. The Black Madonna is an icon painting of a dark-skinned Virgin Mary, credited with miracles including saving Poland from invaders 300 years ago, at which time she was named the Queen of Poland. She rules still as the central religious object in Poland's nationalistic Catholicism, commanding an allegiance the communist regime does not approach. The central figure in Poland's nationalistic religion is this singing Pope, who does not know when he will return to his country. As the day drew to a close, they sang an old Polish hymn to the evening.
This is the kind of Pope that I grew up watching and was so inspired by. This is a Pope who was not afraid in diplomatic ways to call out the evil of communism. And he used his diplomatic powers as a leader of the world's largest religion to go to literally the center of where the Iron Curtain kind of started and try to oppress the people. And he wasn't having any of it. This is the courage that our faith requires us, and we need to we need to pray that religious leaders will find the strength to call out communism, fascism, and socialism, because it is destroying our culture, not just in America, but around the world. What I'd like to do now is make some comments about the culture of Poland, and particularly something that happened that I knew nothing about, but it will certainly inspire you and hopefully help our culture fight against dictatorship in all of its forms. Here are my comments on culture. When I was in Poland for this pilgrimage, I had 48 people join me, and they wanted to go because it was going to coincide with the celebration of the Feast of Divine Mercy, St. Faustina. Anyway, maybe go back a couple episodes and you can see or hear how I was actually a part of this very small part of the proclamation of Blessed Faustina to become canonized as St. Faustina. But basically, less than a mile away from the Shrine of the Divine Mercy is the Shrine of St. John Paul II. And he was obviously a beloved man. In fact, our tour guide mentioned how when we went to the place where he used to stay as the Archbishop of Krakow, right outside of the Franciscan church in this beautiful square, that thousands, hundreds and thousands of young people went to just hear this Pope speak from his balcony. And My tour guide said that it was under his pontificate, and it was the last time that Poland was truly united. It really does take a saint to unite a people together. For example, Mother Teresa just brings people together. St. John Paul, obviously a holy man, brought all of Poland together, and since his passing, that was maybe the last time that people can honestly say Poland was truly united in faith and in a purpose to be free. But that's not the only significant church. In fact, there was one that I was incredibly surprised to learn about. It was called Nova Huta. And Nova Huta is just right outside of Krakow, and it was known as a steel mill. And in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, communism wanted to make this the perfect communist city. Truly, it would be now known as a 15-minute city, where all of the workers, about 200,000 members, 200,000 souls lived there and worked there. It was close to the steel mill. And so they had very little, effort to just wake up and work, which is kind of what communism, socialism, fascists want to do. They just don't want to create a nation of thinkers, but like public schools in America, they want to simply create a nation of doers, not thinkers, just doers. Can you see again why the Catholic Church is against these things? The Catholic Church is truly a religion that wants to tap into the intellectual gifts of people, and they'll also say, work as if all depended on you, but pray as if all depended on God, and also to make sure that we know that our souls are rational, and therefore so should our minds be. And that's why we need to make sure that our minds and our consciences are properly formed. And so, interestingly enough, in the 50s and 60s, communism, having such a stronghold on this little town of Nova Huta, basically wanted to eliminate God completely from their lives. But the people weren't having it. They actually built a little cross area, and they would gather there in hopes to petition for the communist government. In the 60s, they were a little more lenient, so to speak, just because, they were struggling to maintain a strong communist identity. So there was a little bit of a blip on the communist screen, and they actually allowed the people permission to build a church there. And so they built a small little church, but they first put up a cross. But then communists being communists, they decided to say to the people of Nova Huta, nope, you're not going to be able to build a church anymore. And so they threatened to take down that cross. But within minutes, when people saw that communists were there to take down the cross, hundreds of people showed up and surrounded the cross to protect it. In fact, thousands came. And the communists obviously couldn't do much about it, but they came back with a vengeance, and they tore it down. And then the next day, good Polish Catholics put it back up. So it was truly a real fight for protecting the cross. And I had the chance to actually see the cross that they put up there. But as it turns out, they were eventually given permission to build a church. And so what did they do? They raised money and collected money to build a church. But communists being communists who hate religion basically took away the permit and kept the money. So what did the people do? Well, all of this only happened because at the time, the Archbishop of Krakow was a man named Karol Wojtyła. And he used his diplomatic powers to say he's not going to stop people from gathering and pray. In fact, he would go there and pray with the people and have mass in a little small area in order to protect the church's cross. And it was just powerful to see how this man stood up to them and said he can't stop people from praying, and he went and he led people to prayer. And when the communists finally gave them permission to build the church, they raised the money to do so, but then they took away the permit and stole their money. Communists are jerks. They are evil. They will tell you one thing and do the exact opposite. And why? Because they hate religion. That's just the God's honest reality. So you know what the people of Nova Huta did? When they would go away on their little holidays, they would visit their homes in different cities or regions of Poland, and they would bring back stones. And they would need steel, and that would come from the Netherlands. And basically putting borrowed steel, because they knew how to work with steel. They would get raw, unrefined steel. They would process it in the steel mills because they knew what they were doing. And they built a church with stones. Their own stone. I mean, we always call Christians living stones. And this is a perfect example of it. This church is now called the Church of the Ark of the People, because it shows how it is this ark that is bringing the people of God from this former communist way of living to a life of freedom. This is the culture that we as the Catholic Church need to have. It is powerful and it is beautiful. And thank God that St. John Paul II basically acted like a good shepherd who not only protected his sheep, but he led them to learn how to fight smartly. Cunning as serpent, innocent as doves. And stone by stone, they built up a beautiful church right smack dab in the middle of what communists wanted to make the ideal communist city. Guess what? The Catholic faith will always win. And that's why I want to share with you my comments now about what our culture needs right here, right now, in order to fight the dictatorships and the tyrannical approaches that really is not about church not getting involved in religion, but the church being a positive influence on politics and religion. Here's my commentary. So it's again, politics and religion, they should be separate. They should be. But these two great institutions should not be divorced from each other. The government should provide the structures so that people of faith can practice their religion without any persecution. But when the government tries to take away religious freedom, that's when the Catholic Church needs to step up, as St. John Paul II did. In his address to young people in Santiago de Compostela, which happened on August the 7th, 1999, he wanted to talk about the need to become people of hope again. And he talks about how the church looks to them and asks them to follow St. James, the Apostle St. James, not only as a pilgrim, but as someone who obviously was willing to die for their faith. And so in the year of the Jubilee, as he was kind of waning, St. John, in his health that is, St. John Paul II says, "Young people of Europe, let yourselves be renewed by Christ, the new evangelization of which you must be protagonists. Begin in oneself through the conversion of the heart of Christ. Live in intimacy with him. Discover the richness of his person and mystery in prayer. Turn to him when you are in need of the great grace of forgiveness. Seek him in the Eucharist, the source of life. Serve him in the poor and the needy, and await his beneficial coming. Do not be satisfied with mediocrity. The kingdom of heaven is for those who are determined to enter it." You see, what communism, fascism, and socialism does is it takes away the drive and the spirit of the person. It literally doesn't live an inspired life. You just become doers. You think that everyone, while we are equal in dignity, that we have to be exactly the same. That's terrible. What we need are religious leaders like St. John Paul II and strong bishops as Carie Wojtyla was, and not be afraid to speak out against evils. Part of me gets very annoyed when people say, Father, you're delving a little too much into politics now. You should really watch yourself. And that's just because they might like a candidate that is actually a socialist. And that's what's disgusting to me. That they actually start voting according to just the color of their voter ID card. Well, by the way, we're not even allowed to have voter ID anymore. But this is where people honestly have replaced religion with politics. And what St. John Paul II did was he challenged the culture and said, no. It is up to the Catholic culture to have a positive influence on politicians, on politics, so that you can actually be a good public servant. And a good public servant is not going to be an oligarch. They're not going to be elitists. They're not going to tamper down the drive of people. And they're not going to try to make everyone exactly the same simply because we're not. We're equal in dignity, but we're all different in so many ways, as the body of Christ is different. A good Catholic leader will always rise to the occasion and learn how to fight against these evils without violence, but with virtue. So in other words, what we need are good, strong Catholic leaders who are virtuous like St. John Paul II and teach us how to be living stones so that we can build up the church, protect the cross of Jesus Christ, and to build up the church, one stone, one person at a time. I hope that this helps give you some perspective on how to deal with the craziness of the world. And so please make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and share. Let us know what your favorite memory is of St. John Paul II. And make sure that you can help us to spread this good news by becoming a member on our Patreon community to gain access to some great content, but also some special perks. And once again, thank you for listening. God bless you. Fight against these evils in our life. And with St. John Paul II, not only praying for us, his example can help us to constantly stay hungry for God. God bless you.